What if the history you know is more fiction than fact? Myths, propaganda, and catchy stories have shaped our view of the past. These fictions influence everything, from pop culture to politics, so deeply that questioning them feels like questioning reality. But at Flinto File, we believe the messy, complicated truth is far more interesting. In this video, we'll expose 10 of the biggest history myths that have misled generations. We'll peel back the layers of legend and look at the real evidence. This isn't just trivia, it's about learning to think critically about the stories we accept. We're about to challenge some deeply held beliefs and uncover the fascinating truths behind them. Get ready to question everything. Napoleon Bonaparte, brilliant general, ruthless emperor, and one of the most influential figures in European history. His name is synonymous with ambition, strategy, and curiously, with being short. But where did this idea come from, and why has it stuck for so long? For generations, people have joked about Napoleon's height, calling him a tiny tyrant and using his supposed stature as a punchline. The Napoleon complex is a term that's become shorthand for overcompensating due to shortness, all based on the myth that he was comically small. But here's the truth. It's just that, a myth, not supported by the facts. Reliable records from the time put Napoleon at about 5'7", which was actually a bit taller than the average Frenchman of his era. In fact, he would have stood eye to eye with many of his contemporaries. So why did the short joke stick? The answer lies in the power of British propaganda during the Napoleonic Wars. British cartoonists and satirists deliberately shrank him in their artwork, using humor and exaggeration to undermine his authority and make him seem less threatening. A measurement mix-up also played a role. French feet were longer than British feet, so when his height was converted, it was misreported, making him seem shorter than he really was. Plus, Napoleon often surrounded himself with his elite imperial guard, who were chosen for their impressive height. Standing next to these giants, he naturally appeared smaller by comparison. The tiny Napoleon image is pure political cartoon, not reality, a clever piece of misinformation that took on a life of its own. This myth is a perfect example of how easily propaganda and repeated jokes can rewrite history, shaping public perception for centuries. So next time you hear a story, especially one that seems too good or too funny to be true, ask yourself, who's telling the story and what do they want you to believe? In Napoleon's case, his enemies literally cut him down to size with their pens and their wit, shaping his legacy in ways he never intended. The pen, and the cartoonist's ink, proved mightier than the sword, leaving a mark on history that outlasted even his empire. Don't let a good story shrink the truth. Sometimes the real story is even more fascinating than the myth. Picture a Viking, bearded, fierce, and wearing a horned helmet, right? Wrong. There's zero evidence Vikings ever wore horned helmets in battle. Archaeology shows their helmets were simple, practical, and horn-free. Horns would be a combat liability, easy to grab, easy to get stuck. So where did the myth come from? 19th century opera. Wagner's Ring cycle gave Vikings horned helmets for dramatic effect. The image stuck, spreading through art, pop culture, and even immigrant pride. It's a symbol born of fantasy, not fact. Real Vikings were explorers, traders, and poets, not cartoonish brutes. The horned helmet myth shows how pop culture can overwrite real history. Sometimes the most iconic images are pure invention. Don't let a costume designer define a civilization. Even Einstein failed math. It's a comforting story, but it's completely false. Einstein was a math prodigy, mastering advanced concepts by age 12. He aced math and physics throughout school, in both Germany and Switzerland. The myth comes from a grading scale change and a misunderstood entrance exam. He failed general subjects, not math, when applying early to Zurich Polytechnic. Einstein himself laughed at the rumor, saying he'd mastered calculus before 15. The myth persists because we want to believe geniuses struggled like us. But the real story is even more inspiring, a relentless passion for understanding the universe. Sometimes the truth is more impressive than the myth. Don't let feel-good stories cloud the facts. Einstein's genius was real, and so was his love for math. Let's celebrate the truth, not the legend. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made object visible from space. Heard that one? It's a phrase that's echoed in classrooms, trivia nights, and even travel brochures for decades. The idea is so captivating it's become almost folklore, a testament to human ambition, stretching across the landscape and supposedly into the cosmos. But here's the truth. It's a classic fact, and it's wrong. The reality is far more interesting than the myth. The myth actually predates space travel itself, gaining popularity thanks to Ripley's Believe It or Not, and other early 20th century publications. Back then, the wall's sheer scale inspired wild speculation. But when astronauts finally made it to space, they confirmed what scientists suspected. You can't see the wall from the moon, or even with the naked eye from low Earth orbit. The wall simply isn't distinct enough. Despite its incredible length, the wall is only about 30 feet wide and often blends seamlessly into the rugged terrain, making it nearly invisible from above without aid. In fact, other human-made structures, like the glowing lights of cities at night, sprawling airport runways and vast highways, stand out much more clearly to astronauts peering down from orbit. The wall's greatness isn't about cosmic visibility, it's about the extraordinary human effort, ingenuity, and perseverance that built it, stone by stone, over centuries. The myth persists because we want our monuments to be legendary, to reach beyond the ordinary and touch the stars, literally and figuratively. But the reality is more nuanced, and in many ways, even more impressive. The wall's story is one of endurance, culture, and the passage of time. So don't let poetic ideas replace the facts. Legends are fun, but truth has its own magic. The wall's true story is written in stone, not in the stars. Every brick and every weathered stone tells a tale of human hands and history. Sometimes the best view isn't from space, but right here on the ground, where you can walk its length, touch its stones, and feel its legacy. Let's keep our legends earthbound and celebrate the wall for what it truly is. A wonder of the world, built by human hands, meant to be marveled at from the ground up. Let them eat cake, the phrase that doomed Marie Antoinette's reputation. But there's no evidence she ever said it. The quote predates her reign and appears in Rousseau's writings about a different princess. Revolutionary propagandists later pinned it on Marie to fuel public anger. She was an easy target, foreign, extravagant, and unpopular. The story spread because it fit the narrative of a clueless, heartless queen. In reality, her letters show concern for the poor and involvement in charity. The myth is a masterclass in political character assassination. Sometimes a good story is more powerful than the truth. Let Them Eat Cake tells us more about revolutionary anger than about Marie herself. History is often written by those with an agenda. Always check the source before you believe the soundbite. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. It's a phrase that's echoed through the centuries, conjuring up the image of a heartless emperor, unmoved by the suffering of his people as flames consumed the city. It's the ultimate image of a callous leader, someone so detached from reality that he could make music while chaos reigned all around him. But here's the twist: the fiddle, or violin, didn't even exist in Nero's time. The instrument wouldn't be invented for another 1,500 years, so the story can't be literally true. Some ancient sources claim Nero played the lyre, a stringed instrument popular in Rome, but even that is debated. There's little solid evidence he performed during the fire at all. The main historians we rely on, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio, wrote their accounts decades after Nero's death, and all three were openly hostile to him. In fact, Tacitus reports that Nero was actually in Antium, miles away from Rome, when the fire broke out. When he returned, he organized relief efforts and opened his own gardens to shelter the homeless. The fiddling story was likely a piece of political propaganda, spread by his enemies to turn public opinion against him and paint him as a villain. After the fire, Nero shifted blame onto the Christians, a small and unpopular group at the time, and his reputation only worsened as stories of his cruelty spread. The image of Nero serenely playing music while Rome burned is a later embellishment, a myth that grew larger with each retelling. The real Nero was far more complex, an artist, a politician, and a controversial ruler whose legacy is tangled in rumor and legend. The truth is clouded by centuries of bias and storytelling, but one thing is certain: Nero definitely wasn't fiddling as Rome burned. Sometimes history's greatest villains are created not by their actions, but by the stories their enemies tell about them. Don't let a catchy image or a dramatic story replace the facts. Dig deeper, and you might find a very different truth. Look past the legend, question the myth, and search for the real story behind the flames. So, there you have it. Napoleon wasn't short, Vikings skipped the horns, Einstein aced math, and Nero wasn't fiddling. History is a living story, always being re-examined as new evidence emerges. The myths we've busted today are just the beginning. They stick because they're simple and dramatic, But the truth is far more fascinating. Questioning myths isn't disrespect, it's deeper engagement with the past. Next time you hear a fun fact, be skeptical. Ask who benefits from the story. Critical thinking is the best tool for understanding history. Which myth surprised you most? Comment below and subscribe for more truth-revealing stories from Flinto File.